So let's start with a quick overview. I think it's good to say if who you are seeing. It's me, Peter, and our SafeCom president, Ollie. And what are you actually, Philip?
I'm in the advisory board, and I'm also sitting in this picture here, the guy with the green shirt. You'll see my camera later, but it doesn't fit here right now. That's me.
Yeah, but we just three of a very huge community that created the whole international Slackline association, especially the Safety Commission, that is created or that got created 1 year after the real establishing of the ISA. And why did we do that? It's very easy, actually. It's because all the safety topics in our community become much more important, especially the research topics and also the accident and incident report topics. So to canalize everything in one channel, the SafeCom is just the place to be. And I created this hashtag. It gives also Slack nerds a voice. So right now, the SafeCom creates the standards, the safety labels. That's the big topic today. And yeah, we're discussing about everything. We organizing awesome projects. You probably heard of the UV project and lots of stuff. And if you have more questions, please type it into the YouTube channel. And today we're gonna talk about the safety labels in general. We wanna clean all the what's the word? All the mess that's going on Facebook and Instagram. And I hope we can solve all your questions. And yeah, let's have fun and start with the first one. Yeah, in general, I think we will. Yeah, we have a presentation, or we made a presentation, and we're going through some questions we already got from Facebook. And if you have more questions or some more detailed questions from a current question, so please add it in the YouTube chat or on Facebook, or one of us private, and then discuss it live on this talk today. All right.
Yeah. What led the ISA to safety?
I think that's one for you. Oh, Philipp, man hört dich nicht anscheinend.
Sorry?
Some people just commented they can't hear your mic.
Yes.
Apparently.
Okay, I just unmuted myself. So the first question is, what led the ISA to deciding to make safety labels? And back in 2016, Land Cruising and Balance Community approached Bradley Dewling, Thomas Buckingham, and myself as early representatives of the ISA to help them develop a testing protocol for their weblogs. At the time, those two were the biggest Slackline manufacturers, and most people used their equipment. But they tested their weblogs very differently. So the details might not be that important, but this is the original idea behind the safety labels. So 2 manufacturers came to us asking if we could help them set up a testing protocol, and then over the next few years we sort of kept developing this further and further and further onto more different types of equipment as well, and this is what ultimately led to us making the safety labels. Okay. Next question. There it is. Was it just a natural progression of the organization?
Yeah, there we just copied the link.
And also you kind of answered that with the previous one, right?
Yeah.
Should we post the link in the YouTube chat?
With all the questions?
No. As the answer from.
Oh, you mean this one?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Sorry, I can't see the YouTube at the same time as I'm doing the presentation. Okay, maybe you want to answer the next question, Ollie. What's next for the ISA?
Yeah. So what's next for the ISA in general? I will answer specifically for the Safety Commission. Of course, we will continue pushing the labels. We have some more tests coming up. Also, we are organizing a project about the UV degradation of webbing. And then in the original question, I don't know, are you already showing it, Philip? Yeah. ISA approved events. That's already the case for some festivals, for example, the THC in Turkey. But yeah, one side note here is that the ISA doesn't really push towards certifying events, but it's more like festival organizers and manufacturers, city officials, etc., are approaching the ISA, and then the ISA kind of responds to their questions and tries to help out. Yeah. Next question, maybe. ISA approved methods of use for gear. For that one,
it's still a little warm up, I guess, huh?
Yeah. So the manufacturers, they define how their gear should be used. That's what the manuals are for. And if anything, we give accident reports and recommendations if some issues arise, like, for example, the whole webbing slippage thing. But in general, I would say this is more up to the manufacturers to define how to use their product. More certifications, more certification testing dates and testing sites. For sure, yes, as much as possible. If you run a lab or if you know a lab, please contact us. We're always trying to have more testing labs than just the one we have right now.
Okay, the next question I have is, can an individual apply for a label too, or does it have to be a registered company? We thought about this question for a while. Technically, you can apply for a label if you have a piece of equipment that you want certified, but we don't really see the point of that. So maybe if you're watching, you can clarify your question. But technically, you don't have to be a company to send this to us. But if you're not producing the equipment, then why bother having a label? If you are making equipment for yourself, let's say you make 10 weblogs for yourself and your friends, and you want them tested, you can contact us, and we can help you with a couple of test parameters that might help you decide whether or not your equipment is safe. But getting the label for someone who is doing it for himself or a small group of people, I don't really see how that's How does any benefit to you? Next question, maybe for Ali again. Will there be annual meetings between ISA, manufacturers, expert laboratories / athletes to maintain standards always updated?
Yes, basically we are doing that all the time. So we're constantly working on the labels in the background. We're having working group meetings that are online remotely. And then, of course, in the past 3 years, this has also been the safety event, which was also an opportunity for manufacturers and everyone who's interested to meet up with the Safety Commission and discuss these kind of things and exchange ideas. But in principle, every industry partner can become a partner to the ISA Safety Commission, and then we are constantly working on this in the background and having meetings about it. So yeah, definitely yes, more than annual.
Okay, next question is, what is the incentive for Slackline companies to get this label?
Should I?
If you want, sure.
Yes.
Yeah. The most important incentive actually is the marketing advantage and the liability. And it also protects the manufacturer themselves from rip-offs. For sure, it's cheaper if they can do their own testing. And yeah, it's also just the right thing to do for them. And they also separate themselves from low quality and unsafe equipment. And what's the nice word for robbery?
You mean theft?
Somehow product stealing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Theft.
Yeah. Yeah, if something is not very clear, please ask immediately in the chat, and yeah, we can switch back to some questions, I guess. We are flexible enough for that.
Yeah, I think one of the big benefits of having the label, or at least having a standardized testing procedure, is that it makes it comparable, not only for the consumers or the Slackliners themselves, so that when your equipment comes shipped with, I don't know, a braking strength or working load limit of so and so many kilonewtons, you know how that value was derived. So what kind of test gave you this kind of value? Because right now you basically have to take the information that the manufacturer supplies you at face value. So if company A says their webhook is 50 kilonewtons strong and company B says their value is their webhook is 50 kilonewtons strong, there's no real way to know if both of them are equally strong, even though it looks like that. But with the label and the testing, you know that if two products have the same value, they are of the same strength. Because right now, what a lot of we would describe as what others would describe as the established or the more quality focused manufacturers have to struggle against is people producing much cheaper, much less reliable gear that appears to be equally strong and then maybe lighter or cheaper, or it has some other benefits just because it's tested differently, if tested at all. So the label evens the playing field, so that if you have a good idea or a good concept that you put into your product, it actually shows. Whereas now everyone's just like juggling numbers around, and some people are very conservative with their values, so it makes their product look inferior, even though they're technically the same or even better. Okay, I think we have one question from the chat. Naveen is asking where the term safety meeting originates. Honestly, I'm not sure. Maybe Thomas can answer that. unless you know.
I think I definitely heard it a long time ago at the Waterline tour there. Before moving on to the next stop, there was a safety meeting every evening. Maybe
That
from
was
that.
2014. So it
Yeah, I
must
guess so.
must be older than the ISA, and it must definitely be older than the Safety Commission.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe Snoodle invented it.
Probably.
Most likely. Okay. So the next question is, literally none of my gear has it, and all the companies I buy from I trust already to be on it with their safety standards. So what draws a company in to get this? I guess we answered this question a little bit before, and we hear this every now and then, that people don't see the point of having the label. And if there were only like very good and truthful and well-meaning Slackline manufacturers in the world, then maybe that might be the case. And for a certain time, I never thought it was necessary to have a label. But once we started looking at all the equipment that is out there and testing weblogs and webbings from different manufacturers and in different sort of states of their aging, there isn't as much safety left as you might expect in certain cases. So one example that we had is when we decided to really seriously work on the weblog label, we bought a lot of the weblogs from all over the place to check, one, that our testing method would work with all the different weblogs, and what kind of values it would produce compared to what is already indicated. And then for some, we had weblogs where on the website it says like 50 or 60 kilonewton, which break at 23. So when you start seeing this in products that are supposed to save your life technically, then you begin to understand what maybe it makes sense to have a unified testing that is supervised by an independent agency and not have the manufacturers do whatever they want. And it's not that we cook this all up by ourselves. It's the other manufacturers asking us to do this as well, because it gives them the advantage that if they are already truthful, they can show that, and it makes it easier to distinguish between good and maybe less good products. Do you want to add anything to that?
No.
Okay, next question. Will the companies pay ISA for the safety labels?
Yeah.
One intervention real quick. Thomas just answered the safety meeting question, and he says that it started somewhere around 2013, 2014, but it's also widely used in other areas in sports as well. So maybe it's not a Slackline only idea. Back to the money question. Maybe Ollie, you can answer
that. Sure.
The ISA is not responsible for everything. Huh?
Yeah. So yes, the companies do pay for the safety labels. They pay a partnership fee to the ISA, which is $100 per year. And with paying this fee, they become an industry partner to the ISA or the Safety Commission. And then also per certified product, they pay a one-time fee of €50. And we copied this basically from UIA, where it's annual fees that the manufacturers have to pay to sustain the labels. But we thought this was a very bureaucratic way, and this would maybe produce more overhead than gain. So once you're a partner, basically one label costs you $50 on our side, of course, and then additionally you will have to pay for the testing. I think that's also the next question.
Yeah, that might be the next question. How much will it cost? Will this label cost manufacturers willing to have it? Yeah. So as Ollie said, there is an annual fee to the ISA to become a member or a partner, and then there's a 50 euro fee to be on the working groups for each label. And then in addition to that, you have to pay the test laboratory. So this is not money that goes to the ISA. This is money that's spent for the actual testing, like the actual destruction and the other sort of tests that we do for the standards. So all in all, it will be around 500 per type of product. So let's say you want to have a standard on your weblog. You send the weblog to the testing facility. You pay 350 to them. They do all the tests. Then you pay 50 to us to be on the working group. And every year you pay 100 to be a member or a partner to the ISA itself. So yes, this is a reasonable amount of money. And we try to keep this as low as possible. But we can't find any testing facilities that work any cheaper.
Yeah, and also this is already like super cheap if you compare it to the standard prices that you pay for certifying CE equipment. That's like several thousands of euros per product. So already that's a huge special deal for the Slackline community.
Okay, so what do you do with the money? Well, as Peter mentioned at the very start of the presentation, is that we have a couple of research projects going on all the time, and this is what we spend most of the money on. To be fair, it's pretty much no money, and we try to finance all the stuff that we do outside of relying on the manufacturers, because we know that they are in a difficult financial situation themselves sometimes. So right now one of our big projects is a UV study where we bought a couple different webbings from different manufacturers that we put up on a big mountain face, and we sent some of them to a lab to see how UV and just weather and aging affects webbing over a long time. And we'll come back to this a bit more in detail when we discuss the webbing label itself. Okay, Marcus just had a question. He asked, I'm sure you've already covered it other pages, but how many products will you test to create a standard? So for the creation of the standard, so like writing the standard and deciding on the testing procedures, I think we've destroyed probably 50 weblogs so far, maybe more. We made a couple really weak, like cheap weblogs ourselves to test the different configurations in which you can break them to see which ones are the most realistic. And then we bought pretty much all the weblogs that exist or used ones that we already had, or some manufacturers even were so kind to send us some samples that they can't sell because they had sort of like blemishes or stuff. And we broke maybe 50 weblogs and a lot of meters of webbing. But for each product, you break three weblogs you have to break. That's correct, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and that's also answering Naveen's questions as well.
Yes, how many you test,
Yeah. And I think we should add that what are we doing with the money is also that all the work is volunteer-based, and we don't get any money for this. So we use for sure some of the money for traveling costs and to make the work for all the volunteers in the ISA as easy as possible. And yeah, I think when we talk also about the ISA and the work from the ISA, it's not this separate bubble, it's for the whole Slackline community. All the work we do is for everyone, and yeah, it's also very important. We don't want to make money with that. It's for
we
the whole
do really bad
community.
at making money, if that was our goal.
Yeah.
Yes, Marcus. So I think that answers your questions. We would like to break more. I know what you're aiming at with the normal distribution. So the way it works is we have the three samples that we break, and then from that we derive a standard deviation and the minimum break strength. That's 3 standard deviations away from the average. And yes, ideally you would have more samples, and for the UAA you also test more samples, but that goes against the incentive to make the standard as financially attainable as possible. So we discussed with the manufacturers how many samples they're willing to give us per batch that they're willing to test, and 3 is the maximum they could do. So that keeps the cost down. And from our pre-testing when we developed the standard, it also seems to be the case that at least for webbing and weblogs, the results are usually quite contained. So there's not a massive standard deviation. Because most of the weblogs are manufactured either as a single piece nowadays, so they're just machined from a single piece of aluminum, or they're screwed together with bolts. There's very few weblogs where you have like pressing or welding, and these weblogs are a bit more susceptible to having a bigger range in which they break. Yes, the more tests, the more accurate it would be, but then it would also be much more expensive. So right now it is 3. Maybe in 10 years, if like everyone on the world is slacklining and the whole sport has grown much further and we're not like scraping by with 0 money all the time, then we can test 5. But for now, we feel confident in our results with the 3 tests that we do. And technically, in the standard, there's only specified a minimum amount of weblogs or samples that you have to send in. If you, let's say, for example, you weld your weblogs together, and you know, okay, my weblogs are super, super strong, but they also have a big standard variations. So some of them are really, really strong, and some of them are just strong enough. You can send in more samples and pay the testing facility a bit more money to do more tests to have a better standard deviation and to get like a more accurate result if you know that your production process has a bigger standard deviation. But with everyone we spoke so far, they think 3 is good, and that reflects in our testing. I hope that answers your question. Let's go to the next one.
Yeah, the next one is...
How will this affect the cost of products already on the market to those that will come in the future? Maybe you want to do that, Ali?
Sure. Yeah, that basically depends on how much money has been spent beforehand on the testing. So if beforehand you didn't test your gear at all and now you want to get the certificate and you need to do lots of testing, then of course it will be more expensive and the product will probably be more expensive. But if your product has always been rigorously tested, then it's just a matter of doing the one-time certification, and then it should probably not increase the price at all, or just by a very small amount. So I would say this depends 100% on the manufacturer, because only they know how much money they spend on the testing and how much money they want to reach onto their customers of what they spent on getting the certification.
Yep. Oops.
All right.
Okay, next. Will there be reference material for the manufacturers to be based on while developing their new gear from now on? So, in a sense, yes, the standard can be used as a reference guide, and it is already used as a reference guide. So for all the manufacturers that we work with so far, they have all the standards, they can read them. And the standards, maybe that's also an important part that we haven't explained very well so far, is it's not only about the testing and the minimum braking strength and all that. There's a big part that's dedicated to the manual, for example. And specifically for that, the standard is also a good guideline for the manufacturers to know, okay, what kind of information do I have to put in my manual? How do I present, for example, a tie-off, or how do I make sure that people put the pin in correctly and stuff like this? So the standard is also a bit of a help to make sure that your manual is actually complete, because to be honest, most of the products are sort of okay. They're not necessarily unsafe if you know how to use them, but a lot of the manuals are very lackluster. There's a lot of stuff that just isn't covered. There's a lot of problems that you usually encounter where there's no solution to in the manuals. And I know not everyone reads manuals, so in our standard there's options to go between, okay, this is what you have to write down, this is something that you can show in a video on your website. You don't need to update like the written manual every now and then. It's okay to post videos because that's how people interact. And so in that sense, yes, the manufacturers base their development or their work on the standard. But at the same time, the standard is not meant to confine the development of equipment. And so if you have a new idea that's completely different from what has been going on so far, there's no, what's the opposite of benefit? What's Nachteil of English?
Drawback.
There's no drawback to developing something that doesn't fit in the standard, because the standard is not meant for future products. It's meant for what's existing on the market. So let's say you invent a Highline ratchet or something. The standard is written broadly enough that you can still test a ratchet as a webhook and it will work. And then again, as Ollie said earlier, we're always adapting the standards to fit new developments, especially when you look at soon loops and the connections that you do on Highlines nowadays, and the new smaller webbing grabs, the line grip, the small line grips. This kind of stuff is always being adapted, and we're very quick to change the standard if necessary, which is also one of the big reasons why we chose to do the standards ourselves and not work with another organization like the UAA or CE or the TÜV or someone else.
And also, maybe as a side note on the original question, we also work together with the manufacturers. So if any questions come up, they are thinking about developing a new piece of equipment, they want to know if it will fit inside the framework, then of course they can always contact us. And that's also what happens with the manuals. They will send them to us, we will give them some feedback, send it back, they can improve it, send it back. So it's not like a one-time thing, at least with the manuals, where you either pass or fail, but we will also guide them to produce something that fits within the label.
Yeah. It's in our interest that everyone passes the label. And we try to keep it that way. Okay, next question. Not having ISA labels means that product is not good quality. Maybe. It could be. At the beginning, I would say no. It has absolutely no relevance. The point of the label is not to mark or point out the bad equipment. It's to highlight what we know for sure is safe and what we know for sure is up to our and also the community's standard in terms of strength, in terms of functionality, in terms of reliability, and in terms of like sourcing and where does the stuff come from. So not having the label doesn't mean it's bad, but having the label guarantees that it's good. Okay, Ollie, maybe you want to explain the next one. What's the process of certifying a piece of gear?
Yes, I'm just thinking maybe I can quickly share my screen.
Sure, I'll
if
go
you
back
switch to the other setup.
If you go in presentation mode, it should be available now.
Mm-hmm.
And then for everyone who's watching, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them at any point. You can either comment down below or send them to us on Facebook or through our email address, safety@slacklineinternational.org.
Is this working? Can you see my screen?
Yes, it's working.
Yeah, okay. So this is basically a quick diagram to explain how it works, how to obtain the certification. And this is also on the website, so... okay. So the first thing that happens is the industry partner decides they want to get a label and apply with the ISA Safety Commission. Then the industry partner will send their equipment directly to the inspection body. So this is a testing laboratory that will be approved by the Safety Commission. And the industry partner directly interacts with the inspection body in theory. Right now, we try to organize stuff that it all works out, but I mean, this is where the industry partner uses independent third party, which has nothing to do with the ISA, basically. Then this inspection body will test the equipment and send the test report back to the industry partners. So this is step 3 in this picture. And then if the industry partner tells the inspection body that they can share the report, the inspection body or the testing lab will send this report also to the Safety Commission, or at least the relevant part, and like state with their signature and so on that this product is compliant with this standard. And then the last step is that we also have a look at the manual. That's something that we do that the testing lab doesn't do, just to reduce the costs. And then if that is also okay, then we grant the safety label to the industry partner. And this last process is, like I said before, this is a back and forth until the manual is okay. And then, so this will not be a hurdle. But the important part is that the industry partner and the independent testing lab, they can basically do the testing with just themselves. And then this independent testing lab, they will basically guarantee to us that this product complies with the standard. That's the basic procedure.
Top.
Just switch back.
Okay, maybe you take the next one, Peter. Is the product going to be more expensive for the customers for having the label?
Didn't we already answer that one?
I think we might have answered that one before.
Yeah. If they're, let's skip it.
So next question. Similarly for hard goods, once certified, do you expect the design to be branded with an ISA and the minimum braking strength / working load limit, like you would see the UEAA and the major minor axis MBS on a carabiner? So the question is whether or not there will be an ISA logo. Do you want to answer that, Peter?
Yeah, I think the safety standards state what kind of marking is necessary for each type of product, and for some you have to state the minimum braking strength, or is it MBS is minimum?
Yeah.
And for some a working load limit. And those need to be visible on the equipment for sure.
Yeah. So it will be similar to the carabiners. And this logo you see here in the right, the ISA approved logo, that will be visible on the website and in the manual. So if you see this label somewhere, you know that it's approved. Approved. Next. Why are there only 2 products so far that have received a label? Maybe you can answer that question, Oli.
That's because that's all we have certified so far. Okay, that's a
easy question answer.
So there's some products being tested right now, and they will also probably, hopefully soon get the label. And then, of course, this is just the very beginning of the entire process. So we started this process of actually testing and certifying. When was it? In November, I think. So yeah, we're just simply at the very beginning, and hopefully soon the database on our website will be filled with products.
Yeah.
By the way, let me find the link actually and post that also, because there you can check out which products are currently certified.
Yeah. I'm not sure if the question comes up specifically afterwards, but I guess this is a good point to answer it as well. It also depends on sort of the product cycle. So when you have an old product that you know, okay, it's going to run out in 3 or 4 months, and then I'm going to produce a new version, of course you don't pay the extra money to certify the old one. So a lot of the manufacturers that we worked with and that we talked to, they want to start using the label as soon as they publish new equipment from now on. So on a lot of the older stuff, you won't see the label, just because financially it doesn't really make sense for the manufacturers. But everything that comes up from now on, you will find it more and more, I hope. Okay, next one is for you again, Peter. Oh, let me scroll it. Oh, it doesn't work. Where do you see safety labels 1, 2, and 3 years from today?
Yeah, hopefully on more products, I guess. It is a process for sure, and we just started with a delay that wasn't so planned. I think we all know what's the reason. And I think it would be nice if we have more products in the future, and I guess it's a self-development in this process. Yeah. It will coordinate itself. Yeah. What else?
Next question is a good question. What do the numbers mean under the certification? What does ISA 21 mean?
Yeah, this is very funny actually. We are very professional altogether, and so we just took random numbers to make it look very professional. But for the future, if we get more labels and if we also produce more data, it for sure helps us to categorize and sort everything. But right now, at the beginning, these numbers are randomly chosen. And I think we just roll the dice, I guess.
Yeah, we went through a lot of different iterations with the numbering system internally, and we had all these very fancy kind of ways to sort of group the different standards together, so that the first number always means the type of product, and then the second number is for highlining, for longlining, for radial lining. But in the end, we realized the numbers, they don't really mean anything to anyone anyways. So right now it's just trying to be as simple as possible while still maintaining the differentiation between the different types. So that's what you see with the 21, 31, 41, and so on. So don't read too much into each specific number. It's just the number of the standard, just like everybody else's. Okay, next question. I think, Ollie, you can answer that since you posted the list before. What gear currently has labels?
2 products. So currently it's the Highline ring, which is a leash ring from Selectivity, and the Red Tube Type A also from Selectivity. That's the only 2 products right now.
Yeah, there's more.
But for some reason, I can't post the link in the YouTube chat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways.
Just collect all the links under the Facebook post, or is someone not on Facebook?
Yeah, maybe we put it on the Facebook post, or we just leave it in the Q&A and publish it afterwards. That's probably the easiest way.
Let's do that.
There's more coming soon. Unfortunately, we can't tell you, but because we don't know if they pass or not. But there's more coming. Okay, will the ISA have a response to companies, manufacturers selling gear specifically for slacklining that don't have this label or even fraudulent labeling? Like a list on the ISA website of gear that's approved, gear that's pending, and gear that's unapproved failed should not be purchased and used. So as Audie was trying to explain earlier, is that online on our website you can find a link with all the certified equipment. So if at any point you doubt whether or not the gear that you're looking at is actually certified or not because it looks a bit funky, or the numbers don't match up, then you can look on the website and see when, where, and how that gear was certified. Also, if there's product recalls or we find out that the quality isn't as good as it was when it was first tested, we reserve the right to revoke the label. So for example, let's say Slackline company X sends us in 3 well blocks for testing. We test them, they're strong enough, they're really nice and good, and they don't have any sharp edges. But then the second batch really doesn't look as good. We can just randomly buy a piece of their equipment, retest it, and if that fails, they automatically lose the label. And all of that will, of course, be openly communicated on our website and on Facebook and everywhere else. In terms of manufacturers just selling gear without the label, it's up to them. It's very important to understand that the label is voluntary. And this is going to get like super specific, but maybe we can do that at the very end. There's a couple of reasons why we did our own label to make sure that it always stays voluntary. Because at least in Europe, for some types of equipment, especially like personal protective equipment like carabiners and ropes and helmets, you have to have standards. And the way we do our standardization like system, it's a little bit of a workaround to make sure that slacklining and slackline manufacturers will be able to sell their gear in the future as long as they're compliant to at least our label, and so they don't have to pay for the CE and EN labels, which are ridiculously expensive. But yes, in the end, the label is voluntary and will always be voluntary. So if you don't think the label is important for you as a manufacturer, you don't have to get it. We're not forcing anyone, and we're not asking, we're not saying that unlabeled equipment is necessarily unsafe or worse than labeled equipment. And we also don't want to overdo it with the amount of equipment that has to be labeled. There's certain stuff like a soft release, for example. There's no safety issue, or there's basically no way it can fail unless you're really stupid about it. But for equipment that already has labels, or for equipment that really doesn't need any labels, we're not going to make any, because they cost money, they cost time, and if there's no safety benefit to having a label, then there won't be one. So I hope that answered that question.
Philip, there's also been another question on the YouTube chat.
Okay.
Do manufacturers have to retest the product whenever they have a new batch?
Yes and no, Navin. So at the very end of each standard, there's a part that's called quality control. And depending on what type of equipment you manufacture, you have to test a certain amount of pieces per batch. So that can be 3 web blocks per batch, or there can be like 3 or 6 or 9 meters per webbing, or 3 or 6 sewn loops, depending on what kind of equipment you have. And you can test that either yourself and send in documentation of the testing. So for example, if you have a testing machine at a university that's really close to you, you can send it to them, film it, take photos, and have like the testing protocol printed out, and then send it to the testing body where you got your certification in the first place. Or you can just send it to the testing body again, the equipment, if you want, if that's cheaper for you or easier. But you don't have to recertify everything. So for each batch, yes, there's a quality control, but it's much easier and much less expensive to achieve. So you can keep the label even though you change the batches. I hope that answers the question. And then in the end, it's always up to the testing facility to decide whether or not they have to send new pieces in. So let's say, for example, you have your weblogs tested, they have a minimum breaking strength of 60 kilonewton in the first batch, and then it's only 52 or something in the second batch. Technically, that's still strong enough, but the testing facility that gave you the label in the first place might say, okay, why is there now like an 8 kilonewton difference? Can you send me a sample to take a look at? Or they can say, you have to adjust the numbers that are printed on your weblog, you have to adjust your website, things like this. So it's very flexible, but there is quality control. Okay, Jana is asking, will there also be ISA labels for Trickline gear? What do you?
Possibly in the future, I would say, but right now the focus is more on highline gear at the moment, at least. But yeah, we definitely strive for the more safety relevant labels, which is highline and then also Trickline, of course, because of the high tensions. But currently we are not working on a Trickline labels, but this could very possibly be happening in the future.
We also don't have so much Trickline input in the Safety Commission, do we?
Yeah, that's true. If you are interested in tricklining or the development of safe trickline practices or equipment, feel free to join us. We are ourselves not trickliners and we don't know all that much about it, so it would always be appreciated.
Go on slacklineinternational.org/about/volunteer.
And then just type in your email address.
And then you find everything.
Yeah. Okay. Next question is, what are the key aspects ISA will use to guarantee quality control of tests? So as I said before, in each standard, it's laid out what kind of quality control you have to do. For example, for the leash rings, you have to test every single leash ring up to 6 kilonewton. So maybe you saw the video that Selectivity posted a while ago. They're testing each and every one of their rings now before they sell it. And it's basically the same as it's done with carabiners. So you can see with the marking where it was pulled that every piece has been tested. And this is also depending on, of course, what type of equipment there is, how it exactly looks like.
Maybe the question from Laurent also fits into this question on YouTube.
Okay, he's asking, will the test results be available to everyone or manufacturers can keep them secret? They can keep them secret if they want to. So all the testing is done between the manufacturer and the testing facility. We don't know exactly how the product fared in the tests. We only know if the testing facility thinks they should pass or shouldn't pass. And the facility is sending back a lot of information about their tests to the manufacturers, and they can decide if they want to publish that. Some of that will most likely be kept secret or confidential, because you also have to send in where and how and when the stuff is manufactured. So you don't always want to tell everyone else where your stuff is from, so that they can't just go and like make copies of it. So some of it will stay confidential and it's not even shared with us. But it's always up to the manufacturer to decide how much they want to reveal. Some of the tests, of course, like the minimum breaking strength, needs to be stated in the manual and on the device. So you will know some results of the test, but not all of them. I think we can go on to the next question. Oh, sorry. If a product is not up to standards, what will ISA do to prevent it from going into the market?
Yeah, actually, we can't do anything, huh?
Yeah. So as I said before, the labels aren't mandatory. It's always a voluntary action to get the standard. So we don't do anything. If we test material by ourselves as the safety commission, and we think it's not safe, we will let everyone know about this. But otherwise, let's say you're missing some lines in the manual, or your manual isn't available in English, for example. That's one of the criteria. Of course, we're not going to run to your home and destroy all your weblogs so you can't sell them. You're free to do whatever you want.
This comment from Marcus is pretty important. Yeah, thanks, Marcus. And we will keep this topic. As we said before, we don't have so many Trickliners right now on the SafeCom. And if you're also interested in working on the Trickline standards, please feel free to join us and push it forward.
Yeah, maybe also to put it in perspective, like for the Highline standards that we've put out now, it took like 3 years, I would say, from the beginning, or 2. But it's quite a decent amount of work and time and hours of voluntary work that go into this. So yeah, that's why I'm being a bit cautious to say, yeah, right now we will definitely have Trickline labels this year. Because right now we are at the point where we are finishing a huge amount and a huge, very long period of work, basically. So yeah, a cautious outlook into the future. Yeah, sorry, Peter, go ahead.
Yeah, I think what's also relevant to point out here is that Trickline equipment, to a certain degree, is already tested equipment. So, for example, the ratchet, if the manufacturer uses quality ratchets, they already obliged to a standard. The round slings, like the industrial round slings, they're already under a standard. The shackles are already under a standard. So a lot of the equipment that is sold as Trickline equipment actually comes from a different place and is already standardized. Of course, not quite in the same way that we use it, but I think what we could do relatively quickly, if not develop like a proper standard that would cost money and be difficult for the manufacturers maybe, is recommendations. So recommendations for customers for the Slackliner themselves. What can I look at? How do I know if the equipment I'm buying is actually good or not? I think that's maybe where we can help more in the short term. And then, as Oli said, long term, of course, we'll try. Okay, next question. What do you see as the largest stumbling block for the safety labels going forward? Who wants to do that?
Peter, do you want to answer that one?
Did we answer it before? What was the biggest one? Maybe you can say something better to it.
Sure.
I think at the end, the safety labels in general, huh? To launch it.
Yeah, so like, I think one of the biggest one of the biggest issues for us right now, I would say, is to do what we are doing right now, to communicate to the people what the safety labels are exactly, because I think there's a lot of misconception going around on what it will be exactly, if it will force people to use them, if it will force manufacturers to do them, and just to get this point across that it's A, all voluntary, and B, just there to make everything comparable and in the end hopefully safer. So I think that's, I would say, one of the bigger challenges. But I'm pretty confident, so I wouldn't say there are any huge obstacles in the way for the future.
Yeah. To me, it's sort of similar. I'm very confident we can solve all the technical difficulties of creating a standard. All the organizational and the communication that's behind like establishing a standard to making it a thing is going to be the more difficult part. And this is why we do this video. This is why we need your help in the community to sort of spread the ideas behind it a bit further. So if you think standards are a good idea, maybe try to convince other people that they are. Okay, next question. Cheap Chinese knockoff gear? Question mark. Yes and no. Right now, with the sort of more professional or more involved Slackline equipment that we are developing the labels for, so weblocks, like 25mm line, long line, and high line webbing, and line grips, there hasn't been too many attempts at knocking that off, at least not from China, but like the Slackline companies in between each other, of course. But for the beginner Slackline kits, that is definitely an issue. That you have a lot of equipment that's coming from overseas that isn't well produced, that doesn't live up to the relevant standards, that can contain like toxic metals or toxic like colors or coloring agents. There, yes, it's a big problem, but that's not something we can tackle as the ISA right now. So for the labels themselves, I don't see it as a big problem. For slacklining in general, especially beginner kits, maybe yes. Okay. Companies with a rock-solid track record who are willing to sell gear that they've tested and vetted on their end, as they've always done, even before they have an ISA safety label on it? Question mark. Okay, I guess this was like a compound question, where it says, why do you have a safety label? Why would someone want to have a safety label? I think we answered this extensively before. Okay.
Oh, now it's part of the question yes. If we see this as an obstacle.
If it's an obstacle. No, honestly not, no. The Slackline companies who you would expect to be the safest, the most reliable, the most well-liked or most reputable ones are also the ones that are working the most closely with us. So they don't pose a problem to the standards. In the end, it's the other way around. Without them, the standards wouldn't be possible, and without them asking us, we wouldn't have developed the standards. So it's only in combination with those Slackline companies that you already know and trust that we were able to develop those standards. Okay, the pace of new gear and companies coming out, is that a problem, Peter?
Maybe. It could, it would be nice if it is a problem in the future or right now, but currently it isn't. And yeah, you know the market as well. There's not so much, not so many new products on the market, and yeah, so that makes it very easy for us to check everything and to keep the overview.
Okay. Next possible problem. companies / communities pushing back for some reason. Ollie?
Yeah, I think that's what both of us said before. That might be an issue, that we are not able to effectively communicate why there's really no need to push against this. Yeah. I would say this has been kind of answered already. Like, we will try our best to communicate what the labels stand for, and then I guess there's not really any drawbacks to at least communities. Maybe companies that produce gear that would not fulfill the labels, but I don't see it as a huge problem, to be honest.
And at the end,
sorry,
yeah.
Go ahead, Pete.
And at the end, we representing the community, as I said before, and yeah, we can just see the point where we are, and that's the answer for itself.
Yeah. I think we can skip the next question. That's just a combination of questions that we had before. Okay. Some manufacturers already have their gear tested by independent laboratories. What will be the difference between the ISA certification and the independent laboratory ones? Hopefully there isn't a difference. Technically, we have only one independent testing laboratory right now that is approved by the ISA. But if you as a cycle manufacturer already have someone you work with very closely, you can suggest their laboratory to us and we can go check that out, explain how we want the tests to be done, see if they can do it, if they have the correct machines to do it, if they have the know-how, and then they can be a testing laboratory that's ISA approved as well. So right now, the only difference between what we are doing and what has been done so far is that everyone now is doing exactly the same, and with results that sort of represent real world usage. So that all the results are comparable, basically. That's the big difference. The difference isn't in the laboratory itself, it's just the way we test it. And that's what the standard ultimately is. It's just a very accurate, like a very fine description of how to test equipment.
Yep.
Okay, I think this is like a combo question. What type of gear currently has labels? As far as I know, you've clearly established leash, webbing, but what about shackles, Slackline specific ones like the Kingpin, or other shackles made by Slackline companies for slacklining, weblocks, Slackline specific line lockers, anchor ropes, possibly bolts and hangers, span sets in addition to soft shackle, whoopee sling, and soft release standards and proper use? That's a lot.
You already answered it before a little bit, time.
Yeah. So we have finished standards. Sorry, Peter, you can go ahead.
Yeah, keep on going. It's
okay.
Yeah.
So we have 4 standards right now that are completely finished. We have the weblocks, we have the webbing, we have the leash and the rings in one standard, and we have the webbing grabs. So like the line grips, Prosec kind of style webbing grabs. And right now we think that might be enough to begin with. For all, as we said before, for all the stuff that already has a standard, we don't want to be redundant. So for quick links and shackles and carabiners and ropes, we're not going to make another standard. There's no need to test equipment again that's already rated for climbing or for industrial lifting or marine applications. There is a point, maybe we can introduce a standard for shackles if there is more than one at a time. So right now there have been 3 different ones, but they've never been selling at the same time. It doesn't really make sense to have a standard for a single product, because part of the point for a standard is to have the comparability, and if you can't compare anything to anything because there's only one, it doesn't really make all that much sense. And again, with the the other types of products that are on the market right now, for example, the Kingpin, we don't really see a safety issue. I mean, in the end, it's a very simple product where you have a pin and a shackle, and the only thing you can do wrong is not use the pin correctly. So yeah, for the Kingpin specifically, for example, we worked with security on the manual, so it's sort of reminiscent of what the other standards would propose. But other than that, we don't see the need to really test it right now. And in terms of soft shackles and whoopee slings, most of those are homemade. So again, I mean, if you tie a knot in the end of your rope, no one's going to standardize that. No one's going to test that. So right now, the 4 that we have are the 4 that we go with for a while. And then maybe go towards tricklining in the near future.
Jo. Should I?
Yeah, go ahead. If you can see the question.
Yeah. I know we are in a weird space where individuals make their own gear pretty regularly. Are you going to be releasing safety standards on how to make and properly use homemade gear? I think it answering itself with the last question. Homemade gear can't be standardized, and handmade products as well. So yeah, we won't make any standards for this for the future. We can spread out, or we just can spread out recommendations and the best practices on how to use, but not to manufacture your own gear, or we can help, but nothing more, nothing really official.
Okay. Next question for Ali. I've seen some whoopee slings being used and made in ways that would make the people at Samson shudder.
That's a shame, but yeah, same as before, we can't really help with that. I would say that's exactly the same question as the one before.
Yeah. I mean, this is where you, as a responsible member of the community, is asked for. If you see shoddy gear being made or being used, just call it out.
Yeah.
Offer advice. Show people what's wrong, how they can do it better. Doesn't need an international association to tell you that if you can't splice, you shouldn't. Okay, next question. I think Ollie, you can answer that question.
All right. Someone asks, they've gotten 2 safety manuals for Slackline specific gear. What will the label require of the manual, and what should the manual look like? Are they even necessary? Yes, they are very much necessary. That's what I was also saying before, which is a part of the standardization process or the certification process, that the ISA checks the manuals. So in the testing protocols, there's also a section that defines how the manuals have to look like. And this is a key aspect of the labels, that the manuals are also standardized. For example, I don't know, if you are going to get a weblog certified right now, then you will need to have some kind of explanation inside your manual that tells the customer how to prevent webbing slippage. And if you don't have that, then you can't get the label. Yeah, that's absolutely part of the standard and very central role of it too. And of course, it depends on the product, on the type of product, how the manual exactly has to look like. But there are some standard parts, like where your company is registered, how to look for new versions of the manual, and so on. That will be the same for every manual.
Yeah. Do you think
Right.
it's... Oh, sorry. do you think it's reasonable or even possible to fit everything we use into these safety labels? No, it's not reasonable, and it's not an effective use of our time. I mean, in the end, the Safety Commission has like a set amount of work hours that our volunteers are willing to spend. And this is not an unlimited resource, as we, or at least some of us, have a real job sometimes. So what we try to do is to make the time that we have count. And with the labels, it's the same. We want to try them we try to use them as effectively as possible. So we only put labels in place for products that benefit from having a label. Products that are inherently maybe not even used for highlighting, products that aren't like the main point of safety. For example, a hangover, you should never just clip in with your hangovers anyway. So why create a standard for the hangovers or the line glide thingies, whatever kind of design you want to use it. And the same as I said before, with equipment that already has labels, there's no point to just have more of them. Up next. Maybe you talked to Selectivity recently, so you can answer that question, Ollie.
Which one? I can't see the...
Do you envision a future where webbing loops come with a small tag with their ISA cert and specs on it like any piece of climbing gear has?
Sure.
Yes, we do. We envision this future very soon because it's a part of the webbing standard, and there's going to be a transition phase for manufacturers to phase out their existing stock. And after that, then it will be a part of the webbing standard that you have a small tag at the end that gives you essential information and also a way to mark how many days of use your piece of webbing already has, which will be important for the lower type webbings. For example, type C, you really want to know how long you've been using it.
This one we answered before. How are you addressing safety labels for all the gear that's old? If people want to have labels on already existing gear, they can. For Webbox, there's like special rules. They don't have to fulfill all the same standards as the new ones do in terms of slippage, for example. But we don't see all the old equipment getting certified retroactively. It's only the new stuff. Okay, how does ISA ensure that the products being sold in the market are 100% same specs as the one that the brands send for testing? I'm sure the UAA, EN, etc. face the same issues. Curious to know how you'll tackle it. I think we also answered that and explained it a little bit before, that the Safety Commission reserves the right to test secretly and independently from what they send to us. So if we think there's something shoddy going on, we'll just buy anonymously a piece of equipment and test it ourselves. This is also part of what we use the money for, to make these random quality controls. One thing that we are a bit more flexible with is if you change something between badges that doesn't really affect the function or the safety, you can send it to the testing facility and they can decide if it's necessary to retest, or if you can just do the normal badge quality control test. So if you're changing the colors, if you're changing maybe the name or the marking, or if you're sawing off the spikes on your weblog, maybe you don't have to redo the entire test, but can only just test a small batch yourself. So we're trying to stay flexible and easy for the manufacturers.
Did we actually explain where does all the questions comes from?
Where the questions come from? They come from Facebook, where all the problems come from.
Yeah, where the questions come from. Yeah, from Facebook. Cool.
And we're
maybe
also going to
the
post all the questions and all the answers on our website afterwards. So if you missed the stream, or if you can't be bothered to listen, you can read it afterwards.
Don't drop out though.
There's more in the end. Okay.
All right.
Will the ISA be looking into safety standards or label related to segmented highline connectors and techniques, or is that out of the scope? Odi?
Yeah. So some of the stuff that's used for the segmented highlines, like the quick links, is already certified. Not to our standards, but to other ones. And then, of course, for the soft jackets, I think we've covered that. Yeah, we can give some kind of advice about this procedure, but we would also need more data, since it's also kind of a new phenomenon, I would say. Not brand new, but it's not like with weblogs that have been around for 15 years where we kind of know what's happening.
Yeah. I think in terms of standards, maybe not, but in terms of recommendations and best practices, the ISA and the Safety and Education Commission specifically will go further into that direction as the community develops, but not as a standard specifically. Will all the testing methodologies for the safety labels be made public? There's some, maybe there's something that's not super clear to everyone who is sort of a bit further away from the ISA. There's more than like one entity. We're just a bunch of people coming together, having ideas, and sort of trying to work it out in a relatively peaceful and harmonic and cooperative environment. But we're not always on the same page for everything, and this is one of the things we aren't sure right now how we want to go forward. There's some people, myself included, that want to publish all the testing procedures, but there's a lot of valid reasons to keeping them secret, at least for a while. And this is not for us to make money off the labels, and this has nothing to do with like, oh, we made this, it's ours, we want to keep it. It's more that we don't want someone else to come take away the testing procedures and then enforce it in a different standard. So, for example, let's say the European norm, like the Center for European Normation, wanted to establish a Slackline standard. What they would do is to look at whoever is like the closest to being responsible for the community, and that would be us. And then they would just copy paste our standards and make them mandatory within their EN regulations, which would make it immensely complicated for at least European manufacturers and also manufacturers worldwide to sell equipment in Europe, because then it would have to fall under personal protective equipment. It had to be tested at EN certified testing facilities, and it's like 10 to 100 times more expensive than what we have right now. So this is one of the main reasons we keep them secret for now, with the hope that we can publish all the relevant information, at least to everyone, so you have a better idea of how the testing works. So yes, we're working in that direction, but maybe not next week. And also, maybe something worth mentioning when we're talking about the testing protocols, what's also important for someone to rip them off is, of course, the technical details, like, I don't know, the pulling speed of the testing machine, etc. And that's, of course, that's all the specs that you need to know if you're a manufacturer and you want to reproduce the test. But for you as a customer, or for me as a customer, it's not all that important to know the exact wording of this standard. That's why we try to put as much information as possible from the actual content of the
of the testing protocol on our website. For example, how strong does a weblog have to be? Which tests will it have to pass? But we will not write on the website, you have to install it in exactly this way or this way or this way. So this is our current workaround to try to provide you with as much details as possible without revealing the entire testing protocol.
Yeah.
And by the way, you can also check that out on the website. There's a, I guess I can't post links to YouTube, but you will find them in a document later. There's an explanation for every individual label, basically, that highlights the key components of the testing protocols.
Yeah, it's as you said, Navi. We want them to be. We want the information to be out there, so people know that this is actually sort of sensible what we're doing. And we'll probably publish like abbreviated versions where you know all the key details, but not like the letter of the actual standard. Okay, what are the approximate timelines the ISA has in terms of rolling out all of its labels?
Yeah.
We're done. After this stream, it's over. Huh? The ISA is finished.
We close the SafeCom and then everything is done. No, but we finished 4 labels now, I guess. And we start certifying the products, and finally we can really start. But right now it's not planned that we're working on more labels. I think we are open for future development, but right now we just want to finish and launch the current system and bring everything on the road and to establish everything, to prove everything. Yeah.
Maybe another detail that's worth mentioning is that the labels themselves have sort of an expiry date where we come back again and check in with everyone, like all the manufacturers, all the interested parties, all the testing facilities, to see what kind of changes we want to make. So for now, we brought out the 4 labels, but in 2 years' time, we'll just rework and really see what is necessary, what do we have to change, and so on. Okay, next question. Maybe Peter can go again. Will labels hinder innovation?
No.
Good.
Yeah. To make the real quick, the definition of the labels are very broadly, and for sure there can be new innovation, and the label tries to be as much as a framework as possible. And if there's an innovation that is so super new that doesn't fit in our standard anymore, we have to rethink that as well, for sure. But I think right now the current standards solve most of the innovation problems, I guess. Yeah. Okay. Let's speed up a bit.
It's also up to the manufacturers to prove us wrong, huh? If they have a good idea. Shall see. How do you certify weblogs if you do certify them? Yes, we certify them very, very quickly. This is sort of true for all the standards, but weblog specifically. First big part is the manual. This is done by the Safety Commission, and then all of the rest is done by the testing facility. And the weblogs, they have to pass 4 different major tests. One is sort of a handling test, that all the pieces are manufactured nice, that there's no sharp edges, that the pin can't be uninstalled by accident, that you can fit all the connectors that are mentioned in the manual, and so on. That's sort of the handling test. Then we have a functionality test, in which we make sure that the weblog works as a weblog. So a polyester webbing is installed in single wrap, and then it's pulled to 24 kilonewton. repeatedly, so 3 times after each other. And the weblog can't break, it can't damage the webbing, it can't bend, it can't slip. There's all these regulations it has to fulfill before it passes the functionality test. And then after that comes a slippage test, where the weblog is pulled like a couple hundred times to see how much it slips after the anti-slip or the anti-slippage nut is installed. And then it can't slip more than like 10-15 millimeters or something that we specified. And then lastly, there's destructive tests, where 3 different samples are just pulled to destruction with like a big Dyneema sling. And there we take the average and the standard deviation, subtract the standard deviation 3 times from the average to make sure that the minimum breaking strength is higher than 48 kilonewton, and then it passes. So the weblog has to go through all of those tests in order to pass and get the certification. And it's sort of similar for the other stuff. Okay, where can I get one of those crazy weblogs you guys do the break tests in? And I think
Just
that's some
ask.
more question. Yeah. So Bradley Dueling designed this weblog for us specifically to test webbing, because it's actually quite difficult to test webbing without having a breaking strength that's actually lower than the real breaking strength. So when you test webbing, you want it to break in what we call the free length of the webbing. So where the webbing is actually sort of tensioned, not in the anchoring devices themselves, to really know the actual strength of the webbing and not just how efficient the anchoring devices are. So that's why they're so big and so heavy. But yes, the plans are available. If you want to make your own, you can just send us an email and we can send you the plans, and then you can make them yourselves. Okay. Maybe you want to do the next question, Ollie?
Sure. Can you read it out? I still can't see the YouTube
Will
screen.
webbing looms manufacturers be informed, held accountable for the quality of the batches of webbing they are putting out?
Yeah, so the manufacturers are required by the label to basically do their own quality control of every batch that they produce, and then they send the results to the testing facility that gave them the label. But as we said before, for the other products, it's the same thing with the webbing. The Safety Commission at any time can anonymously buy a piece of webbing and test it. We can test it ourselves and see if it holds up to the advertised breaking strength. And of course, this will be much easier and cheaper for webbing. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm moreover curious as to how the safety label trickles down to manufacturers themselves. Will the ISA need to check out the conditions and methods the site is using? How does the UAA handle this kind of stuff? Yes, technically the label is some sort of contract, and within the label it's stated that we are allowed some sort of spot visits with the manufacturing site if we want to. The manufacturers also have to provide to the testing facility the way they actually assemble and manufacture their stuff and all kinds of material they're putting in there. But yes, technically we could check if we wanted to, or if there's any kind of safety concern. Okay, what will be the testing methodology and its corresponding label specs for webbing grippers / line grips? Real quick, for webbing grips, very simple. We test them to 1.5 times their working load limit. We just put them on a polyester webbing and pull them to 1.5 times the indicated working load limit, and do that a couple times. It can't slip, it can't break, it can't damage the webbing. It's a very simple test, and this is pretty much all the specs that you get. Webbing grips, they're not safety relevant, that they don't stay in the rig afterwards. So the test is fairly easy. And then, of course, all the sort of common sense things still apply. There can't be any sharp edges, there can't be any loose screws and stuff like this. So webbing grab is the easiest test. Next question. Currently, as I understand it, there's only one test set in the world. Is this correct? Can you provide more details on their setup? What do you?
Yes, so at the moment, this is correct. We only have one testing laboratory. Like we said before, if you have one, if you know one, get in contact with us. But yeah, about Walter Siebert, he's the guy in Vienna who we're currently working with. He has a pretty big hydraulic compression cylinder brake test machine that can pull up to 20 tons. And as a measuring cell, he uses a cell with a measuring frequency of 2.5 kilohertz, so 2,500 measurements per second. Yeah. He built it himself.
Yeah.
And
very important fact is that Walter knows our language right now, because we put some development with him in the past into the Slackline stuff. So yeah, it makes it very easy to specify things, to talk about things, because he already know what's the language from us for the gear, for example. Yo.
Next question. A safety label may specify what the MBS of a product must be. What happens if a product consistently bends or deforms much before it breaks? How will that be taken into account? So as I explained with Weblogs, there's a functionality test that guarantees that your Weblog can't show any signs of damage or deformation up to 24 kilonewton. So basically twice its working load, and it's the same for the webbing grabs. And also there's the quality check with 6 kilonewton load on the leash rings. So we test not only the ultimate strength, but we also test the functionality to make sure that you can actually use the product as it's supposed to, and even maybe a little bit more in sort of emergency cases, without having it fail or be no longer usable. Next question. Will the ISA be conducting research in the future that's in the field? For example, researching real-life backup falls using dynamometers on the highliner anchors and possibly on individual split connection, yada yada yada. Yes. We always try to put more research to understand cycling better. Not always specifically for the labels, but there will be more research and you will hear about all of the results that we get. Yeah. And some of that has already been done. What do you see as the limit on what will and what will not be tested or given an ISA safety label? As I said before, what necessary gets the label, what isn't necessary or what already has a different standard won't get one. So as few as possible, as many as necessary. Okay. The next question is a bit more involved. I can't really center it. What will trigger a piece of gear that has a safety label to come under review? I recall a batch of Pink Tube had an issue where it was breaking below listed MBS and Selectivity had to make a post about it. It's a great example of companies policing themselves, and in the end it was a non-issue. However, blah, 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 blah. Will it be a stipulation of having a safety label that all batches of that piece of gear need to have a piece sent in for quality control? Yeah, I think Ollie, you can tell a bit more about that.
Yeah, so it was actually during the development of the webbing standard that we noticed this discrepancy in strength and notified selectivity. And yeah, this is exactly one of the reasons why we want to establish these labels, so that slackliners can be sure if if the MBS values that's on the product is actually reliable. And then, of course, like we said before, with the quality control that manufacturers are supposed to do, they will be testing each batch. And the procedure, if they actually produce a lower MBS for the current batch, then we will have to revoke the label and they will have to recertify the product. Of course, they could always choose to not sell the batch that has the lower breaking strength, but that's up to the manufacturer to decide. And I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, and this is not the only case where something like this happened. So in the first instance, we always try to figure out what's wrong with the manufacturers. If they know about the problem, they usually don't want to mislead us or any of you. Sometimes you just gotta get a slightly worse batch of equipment, and you just test it again, see how it goes. Okay, what's the current turnaround for, say, a new webbing coming to you and that webbing being certified? So how long does it take to get the standard?
Yeah. So the testing itself at Siebert's place in Vienna, our current testing lab, is currently organized in batches so that multiple manufacturers can send in their gear before a given date in order to pool the tests and make them less expensive for the testing laboratory. And then, of course, the manufacturers, but that's just to reduce the price. And in theory, a manufacturer could at any time make a custom testing date with Siebert, and then it will take as long as it takes Walter to test the test sample. So I would say, depending on how quickly he's available, somewhere between 2 to 4 weeks probably. And on our side, we will just have to check the manual, which can be very quick if it's perfect on the first try. And if it's a lot of back and forth, then of course it might take a little bit longer. But if everything is fine, then the whole process should not take more than 1 month, and probably in most cases even less. And this will be roughly the same for each type of product. So it's not really any test that will be faster.
Yeah. Okay. Will the ISA safety label be extended to force measuring devices? Not likely. Not many people use them, and they're plenty strong. So there's no reason to certify them. Other stuff. A-frame designs, and tread climbing gear that bleeds over to our sport, or even threaded tubular highline rigs. Climbing gear already has a standard, so no. We can make recommendations on what you should and shouldn't use. Carabiners, for example, shouldn't really be in the main load path of a Slackline. Tread gear, well, up to you. And then A-frames, again, everything that's manufactured at home by people in just a very individual kind of way, they don't get standards in that sense. What we can and do make is recommendations of how to use A-frames and what your angle should be with the anchoring rope and the slackline coming out, and how wide your feet should be apart and stuff like this. But there's not going to be an A-frame standard or anything. And then I think this is the last question. Where is it? Why do you believe the ISA gets so much pushback from the community, not just with safety labels, but with almost everything? It's a good one for you, Peter.
Yeah, I think, we kind of answered before actually, but as I said already, the ISA is born out of the Slackline community, and with all communities, there are pros and cons for sure. And especially if they're creating something new, or in our case, if we try to structure something more with, for example, the standards. It's a democratic process, and there will be always some pros and cons. And all the commissions together are actually a mirror of the whole Slackline community worldwide, and we can get better with better criticism. So the negative pushback from the community helps us to get huge steps forward also. So it's actually a good thing. We just have to deal with it actually. And also social media doesn't properly reflect the opinion of the whole group, and few people can make a lot of noise. You probably know that. And as much we know, we receive mostly positive feedback from the community, and those who are not pretty positive are just we have to just deal with it and make it better. I mean, at the end, we have something like the talk right now, to get more light in the jungle, for example, with safety labels. And that's it actually, I guess. But the most important thing is that we are a mirror of our worldwide Slackline community and not an individual something that want bad stuff. Yeah. Okay.
I think we're done with all the questions. If there's still anyone watching and has a question, just post it real quickly right now in the comments. Otherwise, I think we're going to end the stream pretty soon, right? It's almost dinner time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we can wait a couple of minutes. Maybe someone wants to join the meet, and we have a small discussion round after something to drink. Maybe for 30 minutes more, if someone wants.
Sure.
Okay, Naveen is asking, I wasn't clear about why you think testing a soft shackle is not important. We don't think that testing a soft shackle is not important. If you use it as you would use a normal shackle, it's at least equally important to test it. It's just that if I make a soft shackle at home and if Ollie makes a soft shackle at home, how is the ISA supposed to govern this? How are we supposed to make sure that the soft shackles we and you guys make at home are up to any sort of standard? That's the problem that we have.
Like maybe if there was at some point a machine that could do soft shackles for you and have it be a standardized manufacturing process, then it could, in theory, be possible to do a standardization of the testing. But right now, as I see it, that's not the case.
Yes, and as you said in your comment, if we see that a lot of soft shackles are being sold through Slackline manufacturers, then we can propose a label or at least a testing procedure to those soft shackles. For example, that they also have to be proof loaded to 12 kilonewton or 24 kilonewton or whatever. But as long as most of the soft shackles are made at home, there isn't really much we can do.
Yeah. It seems like we come to an end.
Yeah. Thanks again to everyone who sent in questions beforehand.
Yeah. And for the patience for this very dry talk about this very important topic. We will post the meet where we can't post chats here, links.
All right, sure.
Are you sure if it's a Google link? Maybe it works.
I can put it in the description if you want. Maybe.
Oh yeah.
I just have to make sure that I'm not streaming my screen.
Yeah, then. So everyone who is interested in discuss the topic a bit more, just click on the link and we meet us in the meet in 5 minutes. Grab something new to drink and have a quick session on the toilet, maybe. And then we have 30 more minutes to answer stuff.